method you're using to stream this program. We certainly welcome you to today's lesson. And we want to continue in our theme of love on today. And our topic for today is love that intercedes. From 1:18. I think that's correct. It may not quite be correct, but I'll get you there. So to begin with, I think it's important that we have some background on the 2 or 3 principles in our lesson on today. Now, first of all, Samuel is the last judge in the kingdom of Israel. And this is because the people of Israel, they wanted a king appointed over them, just like all the other nations that surrounded them. Now, Samuel warned them that this would have disastrous consequences. But his warning was of no effect. They continued to want a king just like everybody else. And I'll make a point here that you shouldn't just want to be just like everybody else. Amen. Let God lead you on how you ought to be. Amen? Amen. But they wanted the king. So, but what they were really doing was not so much as rejecting Samuel, but rejecting the Lord. Yeah. As you know, the Lord called Israel to be different from all the other nations that surrounded them. They were his chosen people. They were to worship the Lord and not idols like everybody else did around them. But the Lord, however, allowed them to have a king, which was Saul, the first king of Israel. Now, Saul started out okay, but for whatever reason, Saul had a problem following the instructions of the Lord. So because of his disobedience, the Lord moved to allow David to be the successor of Saul. Amen. Now, I find this interesting because Saul had 3 sons. And if you know anything about being in succession, you know one of his sons then really should have been the natural successor to him, that being Jonathan, actually. Amen. But what's more interesting is the man who should have been the successor had a great love for the man who was about to be the king over the kingdom. Right. So I think that's interesting to me. Now, Saul had a few issues. First of all, as we all do have issues in some form or another. But first, the Spirit of the Lord had departed him. Secondly, the Lord has allowed an evil spirit to torment him. And he also had a tremendous jealousy of David caused by David's successes. And I'm sure some of you are witnesses to people being envious because you are doing well. You haven't done a thing to them personally, but they just don't like because God is blessing you. Right. You do have people like that. But primarily because Saul knew that the Lord was with David. So we'll continue now. And verse 1 reads as follows. It says, "And Saul spake to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David." Now, as I said in the introduction, Saul has some issues. Now, on one occasion, Saul launched a javelin at David. And he threw it hard enough that if it had hit David, it would have passed deep enough through David to pin David to the wall. Now that's not an easy throw. That's a hard throw. He was trying to kill David. Yes. I mentioned that so that you can get an idea of the sense of envy that Saul has for David. Now, if you recall a couple of weeks ago, a couple of lessons back, we discussed how envy led Joseph's brothers to sell him into slavery. So it's a bad thing when envy controls you to the point that you just want to kill the person that you're envious of. So we're talking about the same thing here. So Saul also put David in the front lines of battle, thinking he would be killed while fighting the Philistines. And it's amazing to me that he even thought that after you had Saul run up on this giant and take him out. Why did he think David wouldn't do the same to the other Philistines. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's what he thought. So, and finally, he tried to trick David by giving him his daughter, Michal, as a wife. You're going to have to go back to chapter 18 to get details for that. But just for now, know that the plan did not work. So what I see is one of the takeaways from this is we see Saul directly trying to slew David. Then we see him trying to deceive David. And these are the same tactics as our enemy, Satan.
Right.
He wants to kill, steal, and destroy. So he'll use any method necessary to try to do what? Destroy us. But if we know that if the Lord is with us, then who can be against us? Amen? Yeah. So the more successful David became, the more Saul began to hate him. Now, I'm sure you can relate to having your own haters. I hope you're not a hater, but you might, some people might be hating you. Instead of being on your side when you have a success, they want to talk bad about you. All right? What Saul should have recognized is that this was of his own making because he was the one who was disobedient to the instructions of the Lord, causing David then to become king. So really, the fault lies in his own lap. So now, as I studied this verse, I wonder why would Saul tell Jonathan and his servants to kill David? So Saul has to know that David and Jonathan are close friends. He knows that, right? He would have to know that. But perhaps because the schemes, the snares, and the strategies that he attempted, all the things Saul attempted, they came to naught. So he thought Jonathan and the servants then could get the job done. Or maybe he felt because Jonathan would normally be the heir to the throne, that Jonathan might feel some kind of way and also try to turn on David and also take him out. So actually what he did as a king, when he says to his servants, go and kill him, he's really giving an order of execution. Okay? So Saul is in an outrage and saying these things to his sons and servants as if David has attempted to overthrow him, but David has done no such thing. And if that were the case, it might be a little bit more understandable as to why David wants him killed. But it's not the case. Saul is just afraid. He envies David. And he has the evil spirit now, don't forget that, working in him. Yes. So those are the reasons there. Verse number 2, he says, but Jonathan, Saul's sons, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father seeketh to kill thee. Now therefore I pray, take thee heed to thyself until the morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself. So we see here the depth of the love that Jonathan has for David. Right. So much so that he tells David, look, this is the plot that my father, he wants to kill you. And so right there we can see the topic of the lesson is love that intercedes. Yes. So we see Jonathan interceding on David, on David's behalf. But back in chapter 18, again, you have to read that for yourself, but verses 3 and 4, we see Jonathan made a covenant with David, meaning he pledges his friendships towards him. So he demonstrates this covenant first by telling David what's going on. And it's a demonstration of love because Jonathan really is putting himself out there. Because if his father finds out what he's doing is really considered an act of rebellion. Don't forget now, Saul is still the king. But Jonathan keeps the covenant that he made. Now the word tells us that Jonathan loved David as his own soul. And I wanted to make mention of that because Y'all know how we get every now and then. We easily tell people we love them, but what are we doing, though, to back that thing up? Huh? Jonathan takes some action to demonstrate how he feels towards his brother. He intercedes.
Yes.
He intercedes. Okay. So we also see Jonathan going a step further by telling David that he needs to go to a secret place to hide. Of course, we would think that Saul knows where David lives. After all, David is married to Saul's daughter. So we would think he would know that. So Jonathan tells him, you can't even sleep in your own bed.
Wow.
At least for the night anyway, because this threat is immediate. What he is telling David is to remove himself from the situation. Protect yourself. Now we know David didn't cause the situation, but he is in the midst of the situation. Now sometimes it's prudent for us to remove ourselves from certain situations as we go through life. I can think of a couple times in my life where if I had not removed myself from a situation, it's very possible that I wouldn't be standing here right today.
Wow.
Because it was that dire. But I removed myself out of that situation. Verse 3. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where thou art, and I will commune with my father of thee, and what I see, that I will tell thee. Okay, so now in verse 2 we saw Jonathan give David some instructions. First, to take care of yourself, to hide yourself, and to abide for a night. Okay, these were the things that David has to do. So now in this verse, we see some things that Jonathan is going to do. So first he's going to stand with his father near where David is. So you got to get the picture now. Apparently, wherever David is hiding, Jonathan will know where that place is, but not Saul.
Yeah.
Okay? Furthermore, wherever it is, the enemy of David will be near him, because Saul is his enemy. Okay? But also, that the person that intercedes on his behalf will also be near him. Amen? I believe that's a lesson for that, for us in that. Which is, if we are to intercede or stand in the gap for those we love, you may have to come face to face with the enemy of that person. Amen? That's what happens here. All right? So the second thing Jonathan is going to do is to commune or speak in favor of David. He's going to be a champion for David. Now, we all need people in our circle that will be a champion for us. Amen.
Amen.
People that are willing to take a stand on our behalf. People we can count on when we go through some rough times or when the issues of life come up. Jonathan is on the side of David. So do you have someone on your side? That's the question. Amen. Moving right along. Still on verse 3. I want to bring out this next point because I feel it's important. Now, you may not see it in the verse, but it bears saying right here. The subject of the lesson is love interceding. So now, oftentimes when we think of interceding, we think of doing it by prayer. Is that right? And that's wonderful. Nothing wrong with that. However, there are going to be some times when you're going to have to take some additional action. You're going to have to get involved. To just illustrate my point, if you should tell a hungry person, I'll pray, but don't give them any food, guess what?
That didn't happen.
They still what? They are still hungry. The immediate need is food. All right, so you got to take some steps there. You can pray for them for sure, but give them some food so they can eat. So in other words, you need to take some what? Action. Amen. So Jonathan also promised to tell David, I will tell you whatever you need to know in order to survive. So when you know the plan of the enemy, you're in a better position to thwart the plan. Yeah, I think I can go on. So, for example, several years ago, I played high school football. And I remember we were playing one team, and I played a strong safety, and they ran a sweep around my end. And I'm looking at the ball, but out on this side, there was a split end that came, and he blocked me from the blind side. And the sweep went all around. Okay? Yeah. So another couple of quarters, I looked, and I said, oh, that's that same play. So they're coming around my side again, but this time, I'm ready, because I know this guy's coming. So I'm able to shake him off and then go out there and make a play. So when you know the plan of the enemy, you can thwart the plan. Amen? Amen? And so we know Satan's plan is to what? Kill, steal, and destroy. So let's thwart his plan, right? Amen. Amen. And you do that through staying in the Word, maintaining in the Word. Amen. Verse number 4. And Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father, and said unto him, let not the king sin against the servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been to thee-ward very good. So here we see that Jonathan speaks on behalf of David. Even though Jonathan is the son of Saul, you have to remember that it was very risky business to challenge the king. All right? The king had the power of life and death over the subject, right? Yeah. Okay? So despite that, Jonathan begins to say good things about David. Perhaps he reminded him of what a good man David was. The good things David has done. Or perhaps he made mention of David's courage by fighting Goliath and the Philistines.
That's right.
But he says, don't sin against David by taking his very life. The law of the Lord certainly does not condone murder, which is exactly what Saul wants to do. Jonathan refers to David as a servant to Saul, not an enemy of him. You all remember the song by the OJ's Backstabbing? Y'all probably don't remember that. Smiling in your face all the time, trying to take your place. They backstabbing. So that's not the aim of David, though. He's a faithful servant. So surely David has been faithful to Saul. Imagine staying faithful to someone that's already, by this point, he's already tried to kill him. But he still is remaining faithful to him. That might be a tough nut to crack for most of us. I would have thought that Saul would be showing more gratitude towards David for his good works. You would have thought that. David has obeyed all his orders, and he's been successful in all that he's done. David has served faithfully. He killed the Philistine giant. He plays the harp, even to soothe David when David is in distress and when his spirit is being tormented. And he commands his troops in battle. And all of those certainly are very good works. Jonathan goes on. He says, for he did put his life in his hand and slew the Philistine. And the Lord wrought a great salvation for all of Israel. And he says, thou saw it, right? And didst rejoice. Wherefore then, thou sinned against innocent blood to slay David without a cause. So now, if you recall the story, you know David took the 5 smooth stones and a slingshot and ran towards the giant and lodged one of the stones right in the middle of the forehead. Then he cut his head off. Now David risked his own life when he did that. Okay? Not to bring glory to himself, but actually to defend the honor and to defend the name of the Lord. Remember before then, David said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine out there anyway, talking bad about the Lord? You remember that? That's in there. So David went out there and took something to him. Just as the power of the Lord is working through David, it is through the power of the Lord that Israel was delivered from the Philistines. The enemy of Israel fled before them, which in turn caused Israel to get a complete victory over them. So, do you see that knowledge in that for your own life? In other words, do you see that the Lord is also working on your behalf? Let us allow him to work on our behalf in our life. Saul was an eyewitness to what happened that day, and when he saw it, he rejoiced. And why wouldn't he? he had something to be thankful for. Okay? His problem was he got jealous of David when he heard the chants of the people.
Right.
That was his problem. Jonathan continued to make an excellent case in favor of David. He reminds his father that there is no reason to kill an innocent man. And in fact, if he did so, he would commit a great sin. So 6 says, and Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan. And Saul sware, as the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. So Jonathan then was very persuasive with his father, so much so that Saul listened to him. Saul saw the error of his ways, even if it was just for the time being. Because you can keep reading and you'll see some things in that whole thing. But Saul vowed that David would not be slain. Now, did he mean it at the time is the question. Did he mean it? Because, like I said, you all know indeed, Saul did try to kill David yet again. But just not at this particular point in time, he didn't try. So, he kept his word for that moment, I guess. Verse 7, and Jonathan called David, and Jonathan showed him all those things, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence, as in times past. Amen? So after the conversation, Jonathan had a conversation with David, and he explained to him all the things that had happened. So David trusted Jonathan because Jonathan already had made a covenant with him, right?
Yes.
And so David went right back into the presence of Saul, just as he did before. In our actions, can you imagine, again, going back into the presence now of someone who's literally tried to kill you and have you killed? But this is the kicker. You're doing that on the word of someone else.
Yeah.
David is doing this on Jonathan's word.
Yeah.
Right? Can you imagine that? I don't know, Lord. You have to work on me with that one. This man has tried to take me out a couple of times. But and he's going back under the authority of the person that tried to kill him. But David did that because he believes, he knows, I believe he knows, that the Lord is with him.
Yeah.
He said it when I slew the bear, he knew the Lord was with him. When the lion came, he knew the Lord was with him. When I went out there with the Philistine, David still knew that the Lord was with him. And I believe he knows that being in the presence of Saul, he still knows that the Lord is with him. But the question is, do you know that the Lord is with you? I know the Lord is with me.
Yeah.
Amen? And so that is the question. So, in conclusion though, be willing to intercede or stand in the gap for someone else. We all need that. You might not think you're going through anything, but you still need somebody, a champion for you, to intercede for you.
Yes.
We all do that, need that. And we need to do that for other people. Amen?
Amen.
Ask God for the courage to act on their behalf and the wisdom to know what to say in difficult times and in difficult circumstances. Amen. That's my lesson for today. I hope you all got something out of that. And for next week, we'll be in Luke 10. I suggest that you just read the whole chapter, but the lesson will come from verses 25 through 37. We'll be dealing with love yet again. Thank you for tuning in to this broadcast of the Light of the World, Empowerment.
Elevating faith.
Elevating faith. Thank you. Enjoy your day. God bless you.